Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining the Ted Manila Information Show, or TMI for short, where we bring you way too much information. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rall. I almost just had a heart attack because, the streams weren't hitting live. So I apologize for being like a minute. I guess we're a minute late, but we got it sorted out.
I'm closing my doors, so just keep talking.
Okay. And so, as you guys know, I'm not like a great tech person. I'm a very bad Asian. I'm not great at tech. But I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad we're here. So we got it sorted out. So thank you guys for joining us. On this show, if you're new to us, we talk about news, politics, all the hot topics, lifestyle stuff, fad diets, or diets that are not diets, like Ozempic, or like medical stuff, what the kids are up to, taboo stuff, everything and anything goes, because we really do believe you can never have too much information. So if you're looking for, this straight-laced button-down show, we are not it. Warning right now, turn your volume down if you're at the office. We do drop F-bombs. So that is
you've had that job long enough. Just blow it out. Tell your boss to go.
It's 2025. Get a new year, new job.
Like, yeah.
So it is
burst out freedom.
Yes. But besides, why would you want to work any place that doesn't accept the F-bomb?
Well, or the TMI show.
For that matter, yes.
Yeah.
So,
which, by the way, because you are technically ethnic, Asians are sort of barely ethnic, sort of in America.
I thought I was white adjacent now, according to...
Yeah, that would be true. When I got married to an Asian woman, a Latina woman in my office congratulated me. She said, "Oh, you're marrying up." I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Yeah, no, you're, as a white guy, the only way you could marry up is to marry an Asian person." And I was like, "Well,
what?
I don't know that that's true, and I don't know that I think about such things, but
yeah. Oh, interesting. But anyway, I'd not heard.
I was about to make some extremely rude comment about you being Asian. Now I don't remember what it was. Anyway, I'll have to think about it later.
Well, I'll have to remind my husband that he married up.
Yeah, just tell him that it's according to God, what was her name? Anyway, don't remember her name. It's a long time ago. It was the 90s.
It was the 90s. People were more free. I really think so. Society was more free.
We were more free. Well, we made more money, that's for sure.
Way more free because, Ted, the tech overlords weren't there.
No, that's true.
So, see, it's true. So on this show, it's stuff that you want to hear more about. So we get into news, and then we dig right into the hot topics. And you might disagree with some of the stuff that we have to say.
In that case,
Ted and I disagree.
You are mistaken. That's okay.
Ted and I often disagree on stuff. And look, we don't even hate each other. We actually like each other.
That's true.
And we disagree on stuff. Imagine that. And producer Robbie.
Together, and they don't like each other. Like, like those stories about...
Like, genuinely don't like each other?
Yeah, like, for example, Alan Colmes really did not like Sean Hannity, and vice versa.
Really?
I mean, yeah, they were not buddies. It wasn't like off the air. Obviously. They went out for drinks together. It wasn't like that at all.
They genuinely disliked each other?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was like a... Yeah, it was like... it's like there's bands like that, right? Like the Ramones were a famous example of that.
Yeah, but that's expected to be punk rock, dude. Like, come on.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't.
You have to.
I think
it's part of.
There's a lot of ego in punk rock. That's true.
You really you have to hate each other and smash things and smash guitars on each other's heads sometimes, because that's how punk rock do, man. I'm just saying.
Maybe so.
Obviously, we laugh along the way. Again, we're not a straight-laced show. We are live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, so please be sure to like and follow this show and share it. Please do share it. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button. If you are on Rumble and in the chat, greetings to our coffee crew this morning. If you're in the position there to help us out, $5 a month.
Awesome cat button. Mug. See? Pretty cute.
Oh, cute. Cute cup. So the Ted Manila Information Show today is going to talk about North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Well, North Korea is not the main topic.
Well, North Koreans.
North
And
Korea.
the South Koreans. We're going to talk about the South Koreans too in a little bit.
I'm looking at the logo for today's show, and a picture of President Kim, and he has a big ass mole on his cheek.
I think that's a zit. No, that's a zit.
Oh, come on! Are you kidding me?
No, he doesn't have a mole. No, he doesn't have a mole. It's a zit.
Hey, Mr. Kim, President Kim, if you're watching, I got a good dermatologist here in New York. I can hook you up. Oh, is it Chairman? Maybe.
Chairman Kim.
Okay. Well, no, I think it's Chairman Kim if he in his role as the head of the party, of the Communist Party, but he's also the president of the DPRK, right? He's got multiple titles. He's like all good dictators do.
I really feel like president doesn't fit, but okay. Besides, I like chairman. It sounds better.
Yeah, I know. I like it too. He is chairman.
It sounds...
well, is that true? No, he may not be.
I don't think he's.
I don't think he. Yeah, Kim. Yeah, there he is.
It's not like Chairman Mao.
He is the general secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea, as well as the president of the State Affairs of North Korea.
That's very
and the commander-in-chief
language.
of the Korean People's Army. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very complicated language. The Koreans got a lot going on in that peninsula today, Ted. That's all I'm going to say, because I'm not going to give it away, because we're gonna do the news.
I think you're right. That's a zit. Yeah.
This is it. I told you, his face is actually really clear, like big, chubby, clear face.
That thing.
Yeah, it's just a bad picture. Everybody gets a zit now and again. Come
True.
on, let's leave poor Chairman Kim, or whatever the hell his job is. Whatever he calls.
Don't shoot me with anti-aircraft guns. I don't need that.
No, they would just cyber attack you. They would cyber attack you like they did Seth Rogen and James Franco for creating that movie at Sony Studios.
They deserve to be cyber attacked because that movie sucks.
All right.
The interview.
Ted Manila. That's it. The interview. The Ted Manila Information Show starts now.
And we are off to the news races. Less than a week before leaving the White House, President Biden is lifting the state sponsor of terrorism designation against Cuba 4 years to the day from when Trump, in one of his own last acts in office, put Havana back on the list. The Cuban government is concurrently expected to free a significant number of political prisoners under an agreement it's made with the Catholic Church, including an unspecified number before the end of the Biden administration on January 20th. Said a senior administration official. There was no immediate response to the move from the Cuban government or the incoming Trump administration. Trump's presumed Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has been one of the most vociferous critics of Cuba's communist government and has long advocated for harsher sanctions because, if what doesn't work for 65 years, you might want to try more.
Work on the 67th year.
And Marco Rubio is one of the smart guys in the incoming Trump administration. Do you think,
smart guys,
is Trump just going to, you think Trump's going to just reverse this as soon as he comes in?
I don't want to just project my hopes, but I would say probably, but I do think there's a caveat there because I'm putting the caveat there only because the asterisk, because he's going in as a lame duck. And maybe he'll let it lie. Trump de-gaff. Maybe that's what it is.
Obviously, we assume that that Trump watches the TMI show. And Mr. President-elect, I just got to remind you, there's money to be made in Cuba.
For sure.
A lot of development. The Europeans are making all that money now. They're not following the sanctions. They're over there building resorts, like 90 miles off the shore, away from
our shores.
Why would we not be making that moolah? Really, truly.
Well, there's all kinds of weird stuff happening there, and I would say a lot of it stems back to the JFK days, and that's where I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on, Ted. But I don't have any evidence, hard, concrete, journalistic evidence. So
no, we're speculating here.
Tinfoil hat. But
yeah.
I think there's something deeper there as to why the U.S. continues to poop on this little island and keep their, the jackboot of American sanctions.
Because we're idiots. That's why. you know.
So, there's
Having been there, it's just like
I have
these
not. I
people
want to.
are not. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's such a fun place to visit. It's so cool. American tourism. I mean, this would be. It's such a. I mean, I can't wait to go back. It's great. The people are great. The food's well,
That's
okay.
what I
The food's
heard.
not great, but the drinks are great.
Well, I mean, even in the ruins, it's still, like parts of the city that have obviously never Havana that have not been rebuilt. It still looks beautiful in a certain regard, like that. It's historic looking.
Well, it's because honestly, I hate to say it, it is because of the poverty.
Yeah.
If you look here in the United States at the areas that get gentrified by hipsters and former factory spaces that become like beautiful lofts and stuff like that. These are places that went through a long period of abandonment, and then they end up forming the bones of like reconstruction. Because like, look at this old cool factory, look at this old place,
yeah,
and then it's like,
sure.
Whereas like if a place is constantly developing, they're constantly knocking things down, starting rebuilding, so you don't get a lot of historical buildings. I mean, Havana's very old. It's hundreds of years old, and there's still Spanish colonial architecture there. I can't say that would necessarily be the case if it had been thriving economically for the last 50 years,
Right. Even looking at this guy's walking tour of Havana, it just looks fascinating to me. It looks like something I want to explore.
It's Poe. It's very Poe.
It is poor. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the United States has continually sanctioned the damn place.
99% of it, no question.
So there's that. But somehow they managed to thrive medically, Ted.
Yeah.
Because we should point that out, that somehow their medical institutions.
Did you hear, by the way, that Iran and Cuba both wanted to send help to California, and of course, as usual,
saw that.
We snubbed them, as Iggy Pop would say. I snub you.
Yes, of course. But here's the thing: with as poor as Cuba, well, there's a Mercedes there, and European tags, right? Unless they have tags like that in Cuba, I don't know.
They have those tags are pretty much, they do have them in Cuba.
Okay. Well, so despite a lot of the crushing poverty we're looking at, somehow Cuba manages to be seriously a global leader on cancer research, that the United States is like the U.S. university system that does cancer research, a lot of them like in New York, like the New York State
because healthcare has been a national priority since the revolution.
Is knocking on their doors to say, hey, can we team up with you so you can share your cancer research with us? And that's finally underway now with the New York university system. So there's a joint thing going on there with their lung cancer vaccine, right? So for as much as people want to say, look at socialism doesn't work and blah, 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 they have put some really, they put their efforts, whatever meager means they've managed to scrape together as a government, they've put it towards some things that the U.S. refuses to.
Yeah, Cuba has a very high literacy rate. Anyway, we should move on. The House passed legislation, the House of Representatives, that is, passed legislation yesterday banning
not your house, not my house,
not my house, not Clovis's house.
I didn't pass. I don't remember passing legislation yesterday
banning transgender athletes from competing in girls and women's sports in elementary school through college. The bill went through 218 to 206. All Republicans voted yeah. All the Democrats voted no except for two did cross party lines to join the Republicans. If this becomes a law, in other words, it has to pass the Senate, schools that allow trans girls or women to compete would lose federal education funding. Republicans said that female athletes face unfair competition and are not safe when trans girls and women are allowed to participate in girls' sports. And they rejected the idea that someone born one gender can change into another. Our culture and civilization continue to be subject to the perverse lie that there are more than two genders or that men can be women and women can be men, said Representative Greg Steube, Republican of Florida, sponsor of the bill. An overwhelming majority of Americans believe that men don't belong in women's sports and that we must allow common sense to prevail. I just want to say, if he doesn't think that men can be women and women can be men, he needs to listen to the Kinks song Lola because girls can be boys and boys will be girls, and it's a mixed up, shook up world, said my Lola. Democrats called the bill harmful to children, logistically impractical, and distracting from more important matters. Some noted that the bill would apply to young kids playing for fun, as well as highly competitive college athletics. And they said those situations are different. Fair point. Republicans fearmonger about the trans community to divert attention from the fact that they have no real solutions to help everyday Americans, said Representative Suzanne Bonamici of Oregon. I always like that term, everyday Americans. I mean, are there any Americans who are not American every day? Like they're American 6 days a week, but they take a day off and they're Bolivian? Like what's a non-everyday American?
Hey, if you're like, well, Ted, you have that option because you're a dual citizen.
True. That's
so
still, I'm
I
still
don't know.
American 7 days a week. I am. I'm also French. Well, I'm French 7 days a week. I'm both.
Oh, you can be both 7 days a week. Yeah, I don't know because I don't have that option. Well, look. Okay. This is an area that I do feel strongly about, and let me use the Democrats' talking point, their argument against them. Like this is their own argument. Like let me read that phrase, that paragraph again. Democrats called the bill harmful to children, logistically impractical, and distracting from more important matters. Some noted that the bill would apply to young kids playing for fun. It's not outlined anywhere there.
I think what they mean, they must mean intramural, right? When they said for fun, that must be what they're talking about.
Probably, as well as highly competitive college athletics, saying those situations should be treated differently. And the article went on
through that hole because they did open it up. Yeah.
So when they open that up, and then they go into the whole conversation of how this is like. It shouldn't even be a national conversation because it's just a handful of trans athletes across the whole country. So let me use that argument against them. Why are you bending the knee to a handful of these competitive college athletes, or even high school, right? But competitive athletes in whatever grade level or age, a handful of these kids at the expense of the hundreds of thousands, maybe, of other, let's say, college athletes, the girls that are...
Hold that thought.
I hear your phone. So that's my argument, guys, is like, if you're saying this is... And I'm not anti-trans. If you want to be trans, great. You're 18 and over, great. Go do it. Go do your thing. That's totally fine. But my argument against the Democrats' stupid talking point is if it's a distraction because it's really logistically only just a handful of these college athletes. Well, yeah, it's a handful of these trans athletes, and it's always 100% of the time, look it up, 100% of the time, it is biological males who identify as females 100% of the time in college in Title IX that Biden tried to rewrite.
And I'm on the air.
That it's boys identifying as girls that are taking these medals away from the hundreds of other biological females that they've competed against. So Ted is being blown up over there. I dare somebody to find me an actual piece of evidence that it ever goes the other way. So Ted, what you missed is I said, using the Democrats' talking point, saying this is, a small handful of people, so it's just a distraction. So yes, I'm going to use that against them because you're using the handful of people to break the hearts and ruin the chances of hundreds, if not thousands of girls, college athletes, right? And 100% of the time, those athletes, those trans athletes are 100% of the time biological males who identify as females, taking those scholarships, taking those medals.
True, it doesn't usually go the other way around.
It never goes the other way.
No, it's almost not. It must have happened, but if it has, I have to assume
I don't think it has.
But I have not yet. I think I have heard about it happening. But you're right.
I have not.
I mean, look, first of all, I'm going to say it's not much of an argument against legislation to say that it's a distraction from more pressing issues, because by that standard, you should only have legislation about the most pressing issues, and the more minor
Right.
issues you will never have legislation about. You're right that also, though, it's not much of an argument to say, oh, well, this only affects a small number of people. By that standard, you could say, well, only a small number of people are ever, tortured at Guantanamo. So therefore, it
Yeah,
doesn't really matter. It's like it does matter for them. Look, I have great sympathy for people in both sides of this controversy.
I get it.
I understand why trans people want to be treated sort of normatively to their gender identity. I also understand why, like, if you're a cis girl, you don't want to be like beat in swimming or whatever by someone who basically was born a dude and has all
And
that
went through
testosterone
puberty.
and the upper body strength.
Yeah.
That's going to give them the advantage that turns a mediocre male athlete into a star female athlete. It's cheating. It's wrong. Fortunately, I don't have a daughter, so I don't have
Right.
any skin in that game. I really do. I don't know what the answer here. I mean, the answer to me would seem to be that, and this is almost a cartoon, that trans women should have their own league, right?
Trans league.
But there's not enough of them, right, to have a league.
So that's their own conundrum.
The cartoon Ted Rall would say, well, the key here is we need more trans women. So we've got to pay people to become trans women. Like, you got to like cut it off, and like we'll pay you to become a trans woman athlete. That's the
conundrum.
Answer.
Ted, I feel like there is
writing this down right now. Yeah.
Write this down. This is a thing we pitch to like Lifetime or Hallmark Channel, Ted, is that they can, if there's enough sponsorship, we can put together leagues.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's do it.
Although I did go to ESPN and try to sell them on the idea of what is the thing? Of bushkashi leagues in the United States. Bushkashi is the ultimate sport. There's no rules, and you can die. It's the most dangerous.
Wait, is this the Mongolian thing?
Yeah, it's also in it's all throughout Central Asia. We could do an entire show about it. It's amazing. Bushkashi. So in Bushkashi, you basically you can do anything you want to stop your opponent, including stabbing them and shooting them.
Oh my God!
Afghans routinely shoot each other. It's considered
my God!
But it's not against the law, against the rules. And but like the standard way to stop it, it's like guys on horseback. They literally use their whips and their riding crops, and they try to blind each other and gouge out their eyes. So you see eyeballs flying, breaking. It's the best. Come on, this is like ESPN Bushkashi. Forget football. Forget boxing.
Forget rugby.
Forget rugby. That's like for wusses. No, Bushkashi is the bomb. I've been there, man. I went to the
Roman
World Championship
Empire shit, Ted. This is Roman Empire shit. Like,
it is.
I'm gonna pass on Bushkashi. I'm not gonna co-sign that.
Well, you would no. Bushkashi is like amazing. It would increase our GDP massively. It would turn me into a sports fan. All right. Anyway.
No.
Impeached South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been arrested by cops from the National Corruption Authority after a standoff earlier this morning, local time. This is 6 weeks after his short-lived martial law declaration. He was then impeached and suspended from office, but he's not technically removed yet. That pending a ruling from the Constitutional Court. He's the first president of South Korea to be arrested while technically still in office. He was taken via motorcade to a detention center in the suburbs of Seoul. He said that he chose to go along in order to avoid violence, but he refused to answer any questions during police interrogation. The cops now have less than 48 hours to charge him before they have to get a warrant in order to keep him in custody. This blows South Korea further into uncharted waters, to say the least. Let's just move on because we have our guest coming soon. Donald Trump posted that he will create an external revenue service to oversee his tariffs that he wants to impose on foreign countries. We will begin charging those that make money off of us with trade, and they will start paying finally their fair share, Trump wrote on Truth Social. This news comes a day after Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum laid out a plan to decrease Mexico's trade deficit with China in what was widely seen as an olive branch to Trump. By aligning more closely with Trump against China, She wants to carve out an exception for Mexico and a stronger negotiating position in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement that used to be called NAFTA. Her administration has already cracked down on the import of counterfeit goods from Asia, and she's placed tariffs on Chinese e-commerce platforms Shein and Temu. She also wants to cut down on reliance on imports for textiles and auto manufacturers that are based in Mexico. But whether that will get Trump off her ass has yet to be seen. I think she's pretty smart. I think she's. I mean, obviously, look.
Oh, she's smart.
You look at
She's
a map.
doctor.
It's like, who do I need to be closer friends with? The U.S. or China?
Well,
you're in Mexico.
yes.
Probably need to be closer friends with the U.S.
Well, yeah, but
she should
but
call
at the
Zelensky
same
and
time,
explain how that works.
at the same time, she is kind of it's a soft socialist government, right?
Mhm.
Like in the way many European countries are.
Mhm.
And China has been heavily investing in a lot of their rare earth minerals and
Mhm.
raw materials that Mexico has, and they have purchased thousands and thousands of acres all across Mexico
Mhm.
for a long time.
Mhm.
So, this is, I get it why she's saying that, but as far as Trump doing this ERS thing, like, I get it. IRS is internal revenue service,
Mhm.
and the E is external. So I get the pun there.
I
That's
thought this was the
cute.
guy who was trying to make government smaller.
I was
through
just
Doge?
gonna say, I thought he was like starting the Doge thing that's not technically a real agency to trim down the government
It's the same guy who
because the
started a
government
whole
is too
new
fat.
branch of the military, right?
But he also
Space Cadet
started a
Force or
branch of the
whatever it's called?
military. Space Force 2000. And now he's going to start a totally new branch of I don't know where it's going to go, what agency it's going to go under, but you're expanding government by virtue of doing this. So unless Ted, the only thing I could imagine
look,
here,
we've always collected tariffs. Obviously,
no, I
the
see
Treasury
that.
Department knows how to get tariffs. It's not like the checks were going uncashed.
But I don't know. I don't get why he's doing that. So unless Doge trims off so much of the fat, and then he creates ERS.
I know cannabis is legal, but get real.
So I don't know. It's just an expansion of government, and it's going to be more bureaucracy, and I'm not sure that that's a good thing.
I mean, if you need sometimes you need a new bureaucracy, but this is a reflection of how bureaucracy does grow, right? People say they don't like it, but
With
there's always
intent.
a reason to. It's true. All right, and finally, last but not least, falling debris from SpaceX rockets delayed Qantas flights over the Indian Ocean this month. Australia's flag carrier was given very little warning that its flight paths would be showered by space junk. Stick with us. This story is actually very disturbing. Qantas flights between Johannesburg, South Africa, and Sydney are suffering delays as long as 6 hours coming out of Australia. Usually the airline is diligent enough to be aware when space operations are around its transoceanic routes. The number of SpaceX launches has dramatically increased, however, over the past few years. The company launched 33 rockets in 2021. That went up to 134, roughly one every third day in 2024. Just this morning, I think there were several. The disposable sections have to come down somewhere, and secluded oceans are the perfect place. However, the FAA prohibits flights in any area where rocket activity is happening. The agency also estimates that this is the terrifying. SpaceX's exponentially expanding Starlink satellite constellation could kill someone every 2 years. Now,
yeah.
I mean, granted, that's only one person, but if it's you, it really sucks.
Oh yeah. Well, I found actual video. I think I have it. And you gotta just watch and bear with me here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's our last story, we can kind of have fun with this until Mark hops on. Hopefully Mark's listening and he knows that he remembers.
Yeah.
So look. No,
maybe
Mark
he was
usually really good.
Unless he was hit by space junk.
It could happen. I found it kind of ironic when I read this story that this is flights from Joburg or Sydney, or there's Mark. Mark's popping on. But so if you look at the space junk, this is space junk.
Whoa.
But remember,
that's not small.
That's not small. If that shit comes down on you, you're a goner.
That's changing your fucking,
I don't know.
that is rocking your world. That is changing your
How
day.
this man survived the space junk falling onto his little, his little hut I don't know. I'm going to say Malaysia somewhere. I don't know. But this is a real threat. And
It is a real threat.
We have tens of thousands of satellites and all the shit floating around just above Earth's atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come down somewhere, guys. So the more, just be wary, because it has happened in the middle of like fields in the United States.
Well, what do you mean be wary? It's not like, what are you going to do?
Just
look up all the time? Like,
yes.
And
yes, look up.
That's going to save you. You might run into the path of whatever it is.
No, you run out of its way if you notice something in the sky. That's why my point is to keep everybody's eyes off their phones when they're out. Like, if you can, don't be looking down. Look up, because there's always the threat, like up in front of you and up above you. Like, you're not likely going to get attacked by a snake on the ground unless you live in Arizona, and I know that because I lived there. You're not likely to get stung by or bit by a snake. Something's going to happen to you from here up. So look up, and it's going to be Elon Musk's space junk. And
this is worth asking. Can this be regulated? Is it possible to say that to establish I know there are space agencies that like they try to regulate and negotiate this stuff. Is there? I mean, is this something that
not yet?
Maybe we should say it's illegal, or maybe like anything that comes off a plane, off space, off a vessel.
No, not yet.
Into smaller component parts, maybe.
I think Space Force is going to have to like expand their scope of duties, and part of it is being like space garbage men, because I used to. I mean, really, because we're the ones. Most of it is from us, from the United States.
But everybody's doing
secondarily
space
China.
Now. Even Iran has a space program now.
Right. In the Indians, everybody has a space program.
China has a big one.
Primarily, it's our stuff that we've been sending up there for the past 65 years. So,
yeah, that's true.
And I have asked. I've posed this actual real question to the former ISS commander, Leroy Chow. And he and I would joke about how we need to put together a futuristic garbage man job, like a business.
Like Wall-E.
Yes, because this is a real threat as we send more and more satellites into space over the next decade. There is a real threat that this stuff is going to come crashing down. Not over the ocean. They're not programmed to come down in a specific place. They just come down. So this is real. So, but right now it's coming down over the Indian Ocean. Yeah. That's from launches only. As these satellites age and die out, and their technology just
they re-enter. They re-enter. Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we'll leave that there, and we'll move on to our actual topic.
Okay, let's do it.
All the Koreans. Just told you the news today was all about Koreans.
True. You were right.
All right, let's head to it.
And the Russo-Ukrainian War has entered a new phase. Ukraine's Western allies are finally acknowledging something that the three of us here, Mark Sleboda and you and I, have been talking about for years, that Russia, which controls 35% of Ukrainian territory, is prevailing and will probably win in the end. Trump has signaled that the blank check of weapons and money to Kyiv is about to expire and that he wants a peace deal. Putin says that Russia is ready to negotiate. Zelensky also says he's willing to talk. So will peace talks actually happen? And if so, how will they likely conclude? A sideshow to the conflict has also been Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region of southwestern Russia. Russia and allied North Korean forces have encircled the Ukrainians occupying Russia, and Ukraine has made much of the North Korean forces that have been operating there, although I'm not really sure exactly what their point is supposed to be about this. They just sort of say, look, you have North Koreans, as if that's
there's some yellow people here.
Yeah, like
we're Mongol.
We don't like North. Yeah, there's no Asians. There's no Asians in Asia. What?
Anyway. No, look. I'm gonna let me just say this, because as we know, there are native Russians who look like me.
Millions of them.
Yes, and if the Ukrainians, they consider themselves like super white, right? That's why
Aryan.
They're super white, super like bread loaf white. Mm-hmm. And they don't even consider their neighbors, the Russians, to be white. They're Übermenschen, right? Like they're not as white as them.
Although, who didn't really agree with that?
With having people that look like me next to them.
The Nazi Germans didn't really think of the Ukrainians as being quite as white
I
as they
agree.
were.
This is just, like Stockholm syndrome for Western Ukraine, but I don't know. But let's bring in our guest, because he knows a lot about that stuff.
Let me introduce him. Joining us to talk about all this is Mark Sleboda, International Relations and Security Analyst. Please follow Mark on Twitter, with now X, at Mark Sleboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, and he's over on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, Gramsci. Thanks, Mark. Always great to see you.
Ted, Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI show. And I have to admit, Manila, just the other day, I was walking in downtown Moscow, my face pressed to my phone screen, when I caught a glint far above, just reflecting. And I looked up just in time to dodge out of the way of a falling space module.
That can happen.
It can happen. I thought you were going to say you caught a glimpse of an Asian Russian.
Oh, I'm sure that happens.
All I have to do is look around the metro for that. I mean, yeah.
The Ukrainians are flipping out. They're flipping out, Mark, because there are people that look like me in Kursk with weapons.
Well, I don't know if they look like you, but I mean, that's only from the perspective that all Asians or Asiatics look alike, right? Which is also demonstrably false. But
we all know each other too.
For ignorant Americans who are familiar with, I don't know, one or two Chinese American actors in Hollywood, and that's their entire experience with Asian looking people, then perhaps they might think that. So the Kyiv regime is now claiming that it has captured 2 North Koreans. Mm-hmm. I have it on good account from my sources in the Ukrainian intelligence, the SBU, that they also have captured 4 Martians and 2 Alpha Centaurians who were fighting for Russia. So, I mean, it is a truly intergalactic force that the Kyiv regime has managed to defeat in the Kursk region. Yeah, they claim that they have killed, I don't know, it's either 4,000 North Koreans or 4 billion. I'm not sure. Something in between there, right?
They do have video, though, of 2 dudes who
it's on the screen right here.
Who they're kind of haranguing.
There are 2 dudes. Yes, they have captured 2 dudes. I will say that. However, those 2 dudes look nothing like people from North Korea. I hate to tell you. They look exactly like what the military documents that the Kyiv regime intelligence authorities presented to the Western press, that shows that they are Russians from the Republic of Tuva, right? Tuva is a republic in Siberia, in the far east in Russia. Right. And the people there actually look, amazingly enough, exactly like that. Not like North Koreans, but like that. And they do not look the same. But, of course, the Kyiv regime says, but this is only proof that these documents are fake. That they're really North Koreans who were handed documents that claim that they are Tuvan. And how do we know that they're North Koreans? Because evidently, according to Ukrainian intelligence, they don't speak any English, amazingly enough, any Ukrainian, okay, I'll buy that, or Russian. Okay. They only speak Korean. Now, of course, they were only given written statements collected from the SBU. No Western journalist has actually spoken, or Ukrainian journalist for that matter, has actually spoken on camera to these North Korean soldiers, that we could hear them speak Korean, because they don't speak Korean, because they're Russians from Tuva.
What, by the way,
Can we just look? This is what
Korea-
Koreans look like. North Koreans look like. If you look at the soldiers this is what North Koreans. There is a look, and we do look slightly
there is a
different
look.
from country to country. And those guys, as you said, didn't.
Yeah, their eyes are different.
They look. Their noses are different. Like it just their color is different because North Korea is cold, dude. Like
Mark,
they're usually
big
more
question
pale.
here. So like I remember crossing the border from China into southeast Kazakhstan, and I was startled that even along the border, inside Kazakhstan, not very far inside Kazakhstan, people still were using chopsticks. In other words, there's a little bit of cultural bleed across international borders,
absolutely.
right? In the same way that like a lot of people in Arizona, more people speak Spanish in Mexico, in Arizona than do in Montana. Is Korean spoken at all in areas of Russia that are near North Korea? That's my first question. My second question is, who cares? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they really did capture North Koreans. So what? Is it like? I'm trying to understand the Ukrainian narrative here about the North. Like, who cares that Russia has North Koreans helping them? And
these guys look beaten up, Mark. Whoever they are, they don't look like they've been well cared for as POWs.
There's actual, of course, they could have fought and been subdued, right, when they were captured, or the SBU could be beating, the living daylights out of them to acquire these written confessions that they are, that of course they wrote and signed, that they are actually North Koreans, not Tuvans, right? I mean, that's what is being presented here. So, I mean, Ted, yes, of course, there is bleed over, as there is in every country, but no, there are Koreans who are Russian citizens, right? Who immigrated from Korea to Russia, right? Who speak Korean, but there is no ethnic area of Russians that speak Korean, not even in Tuva or anywhere close, right? And there's not a direct connection there. So there's not a lot of non-ethnic Korean speakers in Russia, which would, of course, make it an extreme minority.
In fact, Mark, isn't there a very prominent Korean Russian businesswoman there, like very wealthy? I forget what her craft is, but she's
the head of Wild Berries, which is kind of an Amazon rough equivalent, right? And yes, she is Russia's wealthiest woman, right? Wow. She is. There's nothing that you can find about her that's really Korean, right? Other than some, she grew up here, right? So on. But I have to say there is a lot of Korean street food in Russia, though, right? Korean restaurants, and Korean food. Even I could go to my local grocery market and pick up some Russified Korean marinated food, because Korean food is very popular in Russia, like Chinese food is in the United States. And a lot of it is not even real Korean food. It's Russified Korean food, which means it has much less spices. Because Russians don't have a taste for spicy food. So, but okay. So about this North Korean troops fighting alongside Russia. So, I mean, this is all premised on in the last few months of last year, Russia signed a mutual a strategic partnership with North Korea that included a mutual defense clause, right? And so Zelensky has run wild with this to claim that there are tens of thousands or 100,000, I don't know how many North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russian forces in the Kursk region of Russia, right? Not actually even in Ukraine, but in the Kursk region of Russia, where there is a rapidly shrinking incursion zone from this Kursk Fool's Crusade that Zelensky ordered in August, that has so detrimentally worsened their manpower and equipment woes from this.
Well, Mark, it's like a Mongol horde, right? Coming from
let's get to that, because
Or a
that's
Hornet.
actually directly to the
Hordling.
point. So first of all, I want to say, like Ted, I would have no problem with North Koreans fighting alongside their treaty allies, Russia, in Russia, against a Kiev regime invasion force. I wouldn't have any problem. And most Russians would have. In fact, if it was actually happening, you could not get the Russian war correspondent and blogger community on Telegram to shut up about it. They'd be excited to actually have allies in number fighting on the battlefield. I would not be, adverse to admitting that in the slightest, except that it's not actually happening, right? There are North Koreans in Russia. There are actually North Korean military in Russia because they are conducting training with Russian forces. They're going to Russian military academies. They're beginning the very long process of building military interoperability with their new treaty allies, which is why Russia has been conducting military drills with China essentially every month or every other month for the last nearly a decade, right? The same thing. I was once a U.S. military, right, who participated in NATO military exercises and operations. And can I tell you, even after decades of practicing together, the language barrier and the institutional barriers between militaries mean that even NATO exercises involving different countries' forces were a complete cluster F all the time, right? I mean, there's really no question about it, right? And it makes zero military sense for North Koreans who have not had military training or exercises or interoperability with Russia since well before the end of the Cold War, when Russia was still the Soviet Union. I'm 100% certain that there are no Russian or North Korean forces actively involved in the special military operation.
And what if there were? I mean, what is
if there were?
What are the Ukrainians trying to get at? What is their point?
Because North Korea is evil and Russia's evil and
Sure.
two evils
Evil
fighting.
empire. Access.
And
New axis of evil.
This is an argument for Zelensky to claim more support. And what he's really fighting for now is direct NATO troops on the ground.
Right.
We're fighting the North Koreans. You have to send NATO troops to help us, right? That is the whole narrative. And it's worked because here, right, we were told in the just the last couple of months of 2024 that Biden had authorized the use of, right? It's really Americans firing long-range missiles into Russia, right? But these ATACMS missiles, but the Ukrainian use of these missiles, because the New York Times told us at the time, because of North Korean troops fighting alongside Russia. Now, we've just found out in the Western mainstream media from headline sources, including the New York Times and Axios in the last week, that actually Biden approved those missile attacks well back in the spring of 2024, well before there were any claims or even a mutual defense treaty between North Korea and Russia. So that has all been revealed as fake news, that was false news fed by the government, right? Claiming that this was the reason when the reality is that Biden had already okayed that months ago. And it seems that it was just the Pentagon holding up the actual use of it because they didn't like their ATACMS being wasted in Ukraine, right? So I would have no problems if North Korean, but I don't believe they are. If I ever see any actual evidence that there are North Korean troops, no matter how much military sense it doesn't make, I would be the first to jump on your show and everyone else's and talk about it, because it doesn't, to my mind, politically matter, right? It's not a bad thing if Russia
I also don't even see how, I honestly don't think it's resonating. I mean, here in the States, I mean, I have lots of friends who are, who have been supportive of Korea. Have been supportive of Ukraine against Russia, but I haven't heard any of them even say like, well, now, Ted, now that they're fighting alongside North Korea, now do you admit? I mean, it's
Ted,
just not.
Obviously, you need to go watch the remake of Red Dawn and get in the proper patriotic spirit. Wolverine, right? The remake of Red. No, that's awful. Don't ever watch it. Don't even watch the original. But if you must, watch the original, not the remake. Yeah, you're not missing anything there. Yeah, so this actually fits with the Banderite fascist, racist ideology of the Kyiv regime, and it must be say of Banderite fascism dating back to the 1930s, because one of the claims has always been that Russians are barbarian, Asiatic, Mongoloid hordes, that the good, fair-skinned, blonde-haired, Aryan people of Ukraine are defending European civilization from. This goes all the way back decades, right? This isn't even new, but it's certainly something that has repeated. If you're paying close attention to the Kyiv regime's media and their statements, you see this recycled again and again in exactly those words. The Mongoloid hordes of Muscovy, right? And whenever there are lots, as you pointed out, right? Not all Russians look like me or like Ted or like some of you out there listening. There are some more than 188 indigenous ethnicities in Russia. And while they are a minority of the population in total terms, that's still millions of people. And if you go out east where there's, eastern Siberia, where there's far fewer people, of course, there's a lot more of them. And a lot of them have served, as volunteer contract soldiers in the special military operation. In fact, if you were watching videos, you wouldn't have seen this in the Western media, but if you're paying close attention to channels on either side, Russian or Ukrainian, like Telegram, that follow the conflict, you may have seen a video in the past 2 or 3 weeks of a close encounter combat battle that occurred between some Russian forces and some Ukrainian forces, and came down to one Kyiv regime soldier who had a head cam on. That's how we have this video, who was fighting a Russian soldier from the Sakha Republic, or Yakutia, as it's better known, where the people there are also Asian looking, right? That's the indigenous people. They don't actually quite look like Tuvans. They've got their own slight, if you live here, you can recognize the difference, right? That's all I can say, generally speaking, right? But it came down to a man-to-man knife fight of absolutely horrific. If you don't have, if you're one of those who has, some type of moral, okay, don't watch this video, right? But I posted it myself on my Telegram, but I make myself watch all these things because I think it's important to understand the reality of war and of this war and of the horrific human cost of it. And at the end of this grueling 5-minute brutal fight with multiple stabbings on both sides,
oh my God,
the Russian soldier from Yakutia won, and the Kyiv regime soldier was dying, and he said, okay, you've killed me, I'm dead, I'm dying, please just let me die in peace. And the Russian soldier did. He got up, and there was this really weird kind of soldierly warrior honor moment between the two of them, where the Ukrainian said, you were the best fighter in the world. You beat me. And he said, goodbye, brother. And the Russian soldier responded the same, and the Russian soldier left him a grenade to finish himself off. Right? It was a terrible, this tragic human drama. And if you watch the videos with the interviews with this soldier later, he's actually been wounded like 6 times before this, and this isn't even the worst situation he's been in. But he kept saying again and again that the most important thing to take away from this fight that you're watching and from this war is the human cost, and that the most important thing for a soldier is to not lose one's humanity in the course of a conflict like this. He was extremely eloquent and oddly, and not eloquent in a rhetorical sense, but just in what he was saying and how earnest he was about it. Now, the Kiev regime media, these social media interlocutors of the Kiev regime, all over Twitter and wherever, Telegram, wherever else you can find them, they were furious about this. Why? Because one of those Mongoloid Asiatic Russian hordes defeated a white Aryan Ukrainian soldier. And you can find comments about it all over the internet and in some of the Ukrainian media. And this is why it all flows together. There are lots of Asian-looking soldiers, right? In relative terms, because there are nearly 1 million Russian troops now participating in the SMO. There are probably 100,000 or at least tens of thousands of Asiatic Russians, and the Kiev regime is using this to their advantage. But the most important to me is the absolute decrepitude of the Western media in reporting this. They never once question anything they're told by the Kiev regime or the Ukrainian intelligence. It's always Zelensky claimed this, the Ukrainian military claims this. There's never once even maybe that they have military IDs from Tuva. They're actually from Tuva. I mean, no, that never it enters into whether I was reading Reuters or the Washington Post or the New York Times. I read dozens of these articles looking for anything, right, that would actually point towards they having some evidence that these guys really were North Korean. There's none. They got nothing. And they just go along with the whole thing, which is the Western media is just a complete
the narrative is the narrative. So Mark, we have a viewer question for you from Adrian, and he's out in Europe. His question is, why would Russia sign any deal or even a treaty when no U.S. president can bind their successor, so any agreement can be ripped up? Shouldn't Russia achieve their aims on the battlefield? And this is, of course, we're less than a week out from Trump coming into power, and what it seems like is that the fighting has intensified for now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it certainly hasn't not, it continues on an intensification trend. Just in the last 48 hours, there was the largest U.S./Kiev regime missile and drone attack on Russia since the conflict began. And Russia immediately replied the next night by I don't have the exact numbers, but presumably what was also a very large missile attack back on Ukraine, and which was probably much more devastating because Russia has much better air defense in those regards. But Adrian, I'm actually exactly with you, right? And this has been brought up by Putin and other Russian officials before. How do we trust them, right? First of all, I don't think they'll sign. I don't think that any U.S. government would sign any treaty or paper over this conflict. As far as they're concerned, right, the official rhetorical line, even though we must win, is that they're not a party to this conflict, right? So why would they sign any paper with regard to it? I don't think it's going to happen. There's not going to be any modern Yalta conference dividing up Ukraine, like, might have once been done, at the end of World War II. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be anything like that, whether Trump or anyone else is the president. And when we've had the U.S. pull out of how many treaties I've lost, like the entire Cold War infrastructure, the anti-ballistic missile treaty, the short intermediate range nuclear forces treaty, the New START, but also the JCPOA with Iran as soon as the next president came in. But in regards specifically to this conflict, right, from the beginning in 2014, right, the February 21st agreement, the 2 rounds of the Minsk Accords, the Istanbul communique, right, it's all been lies. It's all been, and they've held to absolutely nothing that they've actually signed their name to, whether things were verbal as well. I wouldn't trust one of these pieces of paper. I wouldn't wipe my rear end with it. And I don't think there's any.
It's at the end of any conflict, right? You have enemies. Right. If you have a negotiated settlement, like, how did the Americans know they could trust their Japanese counterparts when
in the modern day
of the Missouri?
Very few conflicts end with. How did they know? Because the U.S. had complete military dominance over their defeated enemy and occupied their country to this day with hundreds of thousands of American troops. Right. So
and demilitarized Japan only up until
literally physically demilitarized Japan. Right. So yeah, I don't believe that any deal, any negotiation is possible with the United States except from a condition of absolute, complete, and undeniable Russian victory, which is something that neither the United States nor NATO nor the Kyiv regime admits or will even come close to admitting at this time, right? I think this conflict is going to, unfortunately, have to go on for much longer. I think it will go on for much longer. And I think in the end of it, it only ends with, and it doesn't even really end there, but there's at least a transition to a less intensive phase of the conflict. Once once there is regime change in Kyiv, and then probably further to the Polish border. That's the only time. And that may take
Trump's been clear. He doesn't want this war to go on. He just dropped a line to Putin and told him, "This is a big mess. Let's talk."
Who cares what Trump wants? Trump also wanted to pull troops out of Afghanistan and Syria, and that didn't happen either. I agree. Trump doesn't like Zelensky. He doesn't like the Kyiv regime in Ukraine. He despises all the leaders of Europe, except maybe for Orban and, I don't know, possibly Fitzo, but maybe just Orban. But when it comes down to it, the U.S. president doesn't have that much control over U.S. foreign and military policy. He doesn't. He has presented options, right? Ben Rhodes called it the blob. You want to call it the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy. They present the president with range of options. John Bolton.
Yes, you're right.
Wrote in his memoirs.
I always confuse him with Michael Bolton, and they're both deeply harmful.
I think we would have done better with Michael Bolton as the NSA, right?
Well,
he couldn't have done worse, right? But as his role, he talks about how he openly manipulated and tricked Trump into following a neocon foreign policy. But he didn't even have to do that because Trump just willingly hired on a whole bunch of new neocons without even the specter of claims of Russian collusion in the election or whatever hanging over him. Mike Waltz, Hegseth, Mark Rubio. Okay, I despise Antony Blinken, but it's not an improvement to have Antony Blinken replaced with Mark Rubio. It's just a different persona of neocon. No, I don't believe that Trump. I don't believe that Trump can present any deal that would be acceptable to any U.S. government, to Russia, that Russia would accept. And likewise, Russia has clearly laid out their terms again and again and again from the beginning of this conflict that have not moved except to get more maximalist, right, since the conflict began. And there's no way that any U.S. president, even one that doesn't want to be a part to this conflict, right, and that bought into it by winning election, that any American president can accept, because he is the American president. He now owns this conflict, and he does not want to be known as the president who handed Ukraine to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, and Mark, producer Robbie wanted to ask you a question himself, so I'm gonna pop him on the screen here as well.
Morning, Mark.
Is that Putin KGB bot?
It is. This is Putin bot. Your favorite bot. No, your favorite bot. No, just real quick. I live here in Montana. I love the Spanish reference that Ted made earlier because it's true. Not very many people here speak Spanish. Just real quick, I just want to tell you thank you, because the perception here is that Russia is a dictatorship. If you speak out against Putin, if you criticize anything he's doing, you immediately get sent to Siberia. You start counting trees. You are living proof that is a lie. Thank you for what you're doing. It's yeoman's work. People who are familiar with me, since the beginning of this conflict or before, will know that I criticize the Russian government all the time when they think they deserve it, just not from a pro-Western liberal perspective, right? Sure. I criticize the Russian government for not going into Ukraine right after the West-backed putsch in 2014. And I continued doing that from 2014 up until 2020. And I was still on Russian state media the entire time. And now they all come to me and say, oh, yeah, you were right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's huge, because, I mean, the best disrespect, the fact that you're doing this is awesome. Now, my question is kind of a little bit outside the box. Does the American debt factor in at all into Russia's strategy? Russia's obviously, they're taking this slow, going through attrition. Is BRICS and the de-dollarization, the attack on the dollar, is that a part of this? Is Russia looking at the unsustainable debt that the United States has, and is that playing into the strategy just to drag this thing on until there is a sovereign debt crisis? If you're talking about this conflict, no. I mean, just how about just in general? Like, is that in general, right? I mean, I honestly, I think that the Russian government works from a longer term perspective, right, than the U.S. government does, right? They're thinking 5-10 years ahead. Mm-hmm. Yep. But I don't think that a sovereign debt crisis in the U.S. factors into that 5 to 10 year strategic plan from Russia. Because if you're talking the Chinese, who operate on a 50-year time frame, it probably factors into their planning, right? At some point, right? That probably factors in, because they're even longer range thinking than as you know, the Chinese government. The Chinese, if you want to call it the Politburo, right? It's not really, but they're still largely engineers, right? Like the highest profession from which, you know, the deciding members of the Chinese Communist Party at the heights of the party. There is a trickle of new professions and everything in, but they're still mostly engineers. Right? I mean, that's where their mentality comes from, and it's rather interesting. Like, if you take a look at the makeup, the mentality, right? All of the British, the leaders of the United Kingdom, or England more particularly to say, come out of Oxbridge, right? I mean, that is the mold, right? There is a education and career path that leads right to, you know, the halls of the British government. In the United States, you kind of have some divergence, but still it's largely lawyers and more from the Republican side. There's more businessmen. That is kind of an emerging modern phenomenon, I would say, in the last 20 years. But
in China and Russia, it's lawyers, but also lawyers who also often have an intelligence background, right? They're not an absolute majority, but they are still a plurality of the most important players of the Russian government.
Gotcha.
But there's a big push in the wake of this conflict. Putin has pushed it more and more and more. He's saying that the new Russian political and social elite should all be veterans of the special military operation. That should be Russia's political and social elite moving forward. And he's done a lot to encourage that. So you're already seeing veterans of the special military operation in being Duma members, being members of local governments and stuff. That's actually already happening at this point. In China, it's engineers, and it creates different types of leadership mentalities among the modern countries, and that's why the Chinese leaders look further ahead. I think than a lot of people. But they are also the old, one of the oldest continuous civilizations, of course, and their time frame probably of geostrategic thinking probably includes the idea that U.S. national and not only national. If you take a look, state debt, right? Corporate debt, consumer debt. Right, it probably factors in, but it's still not a short-term phenomenon. And even BRICS, right? BRICS is still much more. I hate to say this because people get upset. BRICS is still largely aspirational, right? It is. Right. There's very little actually, and they're trying to change that, right? They're trying to create a BRICS version of SWIFT. Right now, the only concrete BRICS is often imagined. Okay, first of all, they're not an anti-NATO. They're not an anti-U.S. hegemony organization. That's not what they are, right? And when they include
not a military, it's not a military organization.
They don't even want to be a counter geopolitical bloc to the West, right? Because that's not what Egypt wants. That's not what the UAE wants, right? That is not what Brazil wants. That's not the way they look at the world, right? So BRICS is more than Russia and China, and so there has to be consensus. And yes, they want to create a parallel economic architecture, the economic and finance architecture of the world, just because they want to live outside of the U.S. and European control of the existing system like that. But that's from a lot of the countries in BRICS, that's not because they want to destroy. They're just opting out or opting for options to coexist alongside that. And that's important. The U.S. may not, they may just see it, if you're not part of our economic system that we largely control, then you're an enemy, right? Yes, the U.S. may see it that way, but that's not the way that India sees it. That's not the way that Egypt sees it. That's not the way these other countries see it. But the new development bank, the BRICS New Development Bank, is the only concrete piece of that alternate or parallel economic architecture, providing some of the functions of the World Bank and the Economic Forum that are existing under U.S. and European control today. But there are plans to develop more, and an alternate form of international finance messaging, right? An alternate SWIFT system is right now the priority that they are working on. However, this all would have been much easier if they had agreed on this before BRICS expanded. If it had been something that countries bought into by signing on to BRICS, that would be much easier than now convincing everyone, including Egypt and the UAE and now Indonesia and other countries of all coming to a consensus agreement on this stuff. It would have been much easier before the fact. I'm just saying that. Expansion of an old multilateral organization always dilutes the political impetus of these organizations. It's one of the the nature of the beast.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much for that. So
Yeah, appreciate you. Go ahead.
If the U.S. attacks Iran, do you think that North Korea would then deploy its vaunted military to save the Iranian revolution?
Absolutely. I can fully expect Netanyahu to be doing videos with captured North Korean soldiers who are not speaking to the camera. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. Right? We live in an almost farcical world of propaganda at this point, right? And the conflict in Palestine, or if you want to call it the larger conflict in the Middle East, is just another example of that propaganda bubble and the difference between that and realities on the ground. And you guys, of course, are as eloquent in exposing that as you are in the conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah, all good. Thanks, Robbie. I'm gonna move you back into lurking in the chats.
Back to the producer land.
You are dismissed, sir.
Hey, I'm a married man. I'm used to it. Just get to the back.
Thanks, Robbie.
My wife is sitting right there.
Like, hey, you guys, an ex-husband there and a current husband there, you guys. I just got to pop this on screen for a second because in case you guys missed this. So on Ukrainian TV, that's not state controlled at all, Mark, as we know, it's totally free.
No, it's not. I mean, they actually literally have a unified information policy where they have absolute, complete, and total control of their media and have banned hundreds of media organizations that were critical of the Ukrainian government.
But that's how you protect democracy.
That's right.
It's 2025. This is how you protect democracy.
My bad.
Yep. It's a very specific type of democracy.
It's a special kind of democracy. Just like in Romania, they're protecting democracy by overthrowing election results that weren't.
In Germany,
they were the wrong results, Mark. The wrong results.
Germany, getting ready to ban or annul results that are favorable to the AfD.
Wrong results. I'm just saying. But Zelensky says this, and this we'll make this the last comment here. Somehow Zelensky thinks that this is going to work. He says Trump and I will come to an agreement and offer strong security guarantees together with Europe, and then we can talk to the Russians.
Okay, that's not going to happen either. Right. That's not. But Trump is going to be in a tough position, right? Because he's going to pitch his deal that he intends to force on the Kyiv regime to Putin. And Putin will say, that's nice. And we're glad to talk to you. But no, you don't get to dictate the terms of this conflict. You're not some third party. You're the U.S. president. You are a party to this conflict. And you're a part of the losing side of this conflict. We dictate terms to you, not the other way around. So when Putin says "niet," thanks but no thanks, what does Trump do then? That's the most important thing. Does he just walk away and say, I tried and I'm not going to support Ukraine anymore, and Putin can just do what he wants? No, of course he can't do that. He might want to do that, right? That they're probably, but he won't be able to do it. If he did do that, right, he'd be following JFK real quickly. I hate to tell you, right? Yikes. There's already been a few attempts in that direction. Yeah. But Zelensky and Trump are not friends. But it does not mean that Trump can completely just abandon Ukraine. The U.S. has invested too much money, too much geopolitical and political capital to just walk away from this project Ukraine.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't there a chance that Trump is going to come in, look at this, and say, "Look, we're throwing good money after bad at this point"?
And what? Walk away? Say, oh, we can't do anything. We just. I don't think the U.S. I don't think the U.S. president has the power to do that.
Well, we did that in
Trump
Trump negotiated that with the Taliban, right?
That was after a 20 years of U.S. military occupation of Afghanistan. And even then, he couldn't finish it up during his administration, and Biden walked away from it. And Blinken has admitted as much, that ultimately the decision to walk away from Afghanistan was so that the U.S. would have more military resources for Ukraine, which they knew was about to kick off.
Which they bungled anyway.
And said that. So, look, I hope I'm wrong on this, right? I hope that Trump can just agree, to something that would be acceptable to Russia, or just walk away and wash his hands of it. I just don't do
cards. He holds some cards, right? I mean, it's like
it's the money.
Well, I mean, Russia would like this to come to an end. I mean, they're winning, but it's also like, the Americans can drag this shit out, and they're good at it, as we just talked about in Afghanistan.
That was America's goal.
And the defense industry wants to drag it out, right? So they want it to go on forever and ever. So
right, we like endless war.
Obviously, I don't think Putin wanted this war in the first place.
No, he didn't.
And so like now it's like, and I think he's pretty clear. Like, yeah, he's not going to be humiliated or anything. But I mean, it's not like the U.S. has no. I mean, they're not holding a pair of twos. They're not holding a royal flush, but they've got some stuff to negotiate with, I would say.
Can the Trump administration remove sanctions in the U.S. and Europe from Russia?
It's like sanctions never go away.
They never go away. Jackson Vanik took decades to get rid of after the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Why? Because the Republicans may have a majority in both houses of Congress, but that's different from Trump having a majority in both houses of Congress, right? That is a different thing. And to expect Lindsey Graham and the other, shall we say, old school Republicans to vote to remove sanctions from Russia is unbelievable. It's just not going to happen.
Although I do think Trump is in a remarkably unique position. We have never had any president in American history do a return like this, come in as a one-term president guaranteed. That's never happened, right? The last time we had someone come back like that was Grover Cleveland, but there was no term limit at the time constitutionally. He could have run again in 1896, chose not to. Trump is in a unique. He's either, depending on how you look at it, the lamest of all lame ducks, or as free as can be, and I don't know which it is.
I think a lame duck can be a free bird, guys. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that he's a lame duck. He does have power, but I think more of that power is domestic in the United States than it necessarily he can exert in a foreign policy and military direction. But Trump is completely outside the orthodoxy of U.S. foreign policy and military thinking. He is, right? That's obvious.
That's true.
Looks at the world in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? Which is going to make his
We haven't had someone like this in my lifetime.
With the blob,
Jimmy Carter might have been the closest.
Like during his first administration.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe he can work out around it, right? We've seen presidents who tried to go outside the blob before, right? Who promised to scatter the CIA to the wind, and look what happened there. I hope, right? I always view Trump as a chaos bomb. Right? Yep. You don't know what he's going to do. I don't think Trump knows what he's going to do until someone talks to him.
It's my favorite thing about him.
I think that's true.
It's just a matter of where does that chaos bomb go off. Right now, it looks like that chaos bomb is going off on the transatlantic relationship. That itself is of immense benefit to Russia. But that chaos bomb is like a bouncing Betsy, right? it spins around, right? It goes from here to there, and it's going to go off in multiple different places.
It's like the ball in black, and when you're playing roulette, right? Like the ball, just you drop it in, and I don't know where it's going to fall. But
When Putin said he it's assumed that he was joking when he said that he would have preferred Biden or Kamala Harris over Trump because of predictability. He's not entirely trolling there, right? Predictability against in the logic, right? The zero-sum game logic of a nuclear peer competitor. You prefer predictability with these people. You want to know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Does anyone think that Trump was going to come into office all but declaring himself Donald the Orange, King of Greenland, right? Who could have predicted that even a month ago? I couldn't have, right? And I think Russia's scratching their head. Is this a U.S. geopolitical play to counter us in the Arctic? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if Trump knows, right? But you can be sure that the neocons that surround Trump will try to exploit this situation as they will anything else. They're very good at it. They will try to manage him. He will bounce around whatever little box they try to build him. Will he escape it? I don't know. I would say I hope so, but I don't do hope. I just don't. It doesn't help analysis. I go on what the U.S. has historically done and what Trump did the last time he was the U.S. president. And if he pleasantly surprises us all by giving us U.S. hegemony, global hegemony, and abandoning Ukraine, then I will be extremely glad to be wrong, and I will come on and I don't know. I'll give you a pedicure, Ted, if you want one. Genuflect.
Manny and Petty, please. I like them both.
Yeah. Okay. All
Legit.
right. It'll be a learning experience for both of us.
You can stay at my place, though.
If that happens, Mark, I think you need to do the Trump dance.
All right, I can. Yeah.
We can Trump if we want to.
Yes, you got to do the Trump dance.
I will be glad and pleased to be wrong, but that's not where I'm the black pill, right? I start everything with the absolute worst imaginable outcome because that is my misanthropic view of humanity, and then I allow myself to be slowly and selectively walked back by facts and evidence from that absolute worst position, and it makes
and then
me
you're never disappointed.
I'm never I'm very rarely. I can be pleasantly surprised, but it only happens once a blue moon.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I get it. And I read a lot of David Hume when I was in college. So I'm kind of like, people suck. And on the occasion that they're really good, I'm like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Like,
I'm more an animal person than a human person.
With that, we'll leave that there. We'll advise people to go read some David Hume and go read some other nihilist authors or whatever. And we'll then we won't be disappointed.
Diogenes, I bite also my friends like a dog in order to save them.
Oh boy. Mark Sleboda, that's the last word. Thank you so much, Mark Sleboda.
That's the last word, like always. All right.
That is the last word. Mark Sleboda, of course, is an international relations and security analyst expert, I would say. You can follow Mark on Twitter. We still call it that here because we old. Mark Sleboda and the number 1. Mark Sleboda 1. And the YouTube channel, Mark, I can never keep up because mine just got totally nuked. I'm not allowed to have an account.
I don't use YouTube anymore. It's too controlled. But you can follow me on Substack or Telegram at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda.
Oh, good. So you kept the name. Okay, I'm going to update your bio on that. Of course, on Facebook, /Gramsci. Mark Sleboda, always appreciate your expertise. Thank you, my friend. Happy New Year. Merry belated Orthodox Christmas. I'm sure wifey celebrates in January.
Yes, she does. Yes,
Merry Christmas to her. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Mark.
Always fun.
Always.
Very informative, as always, and a blast.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I just got to say
Almost
this,
as
Ted.
cynical as I
Usually,
am.
almost. I got to say, usually smart people, analysts, like eggheads in general, aren't usually so good humored or like well rounded. You know, like in having fun, right? Because usually when you talk to these types, these analyst types, they're usually very blasé. Ted sneezing, bless you. They're very. Yeah, I think you agree with me, Ted. They're usually
do
very
agree.
these
That
analyst
was
types.
not
They're
that was not a cough of sarcasm. That was just a cough.
yeah, but that's that's why I love having Mark on, because he's like one of these animated fun analysts that are rare. It's so rare. So it's it's much appreciated.
I'm
All
more
right.
I'm more optimistic about the prospects for a peace agreement than
Really?
than he is. I'm not saying it's more likely than not. I'm not saying it's like better than 50% odds.
Yeah.
But I do think it's not nothing, and I don't think it's like 2%. I
agree.
I think if I had to handicap this, I'd say there's about a 25% chance of a deal within the next 6 months. And I think it might be. I think it's going to be a multi-part deal. I think it's going to start out, if it happens, I think it'll start out with a ceasefire, and then there's going to be negotiations about. There's going to be some horse trading because Russia wants, the Donbass, and they don't have all of it, but they have other parts that they don't want. So they're going to switch. They're going to trade off territory, establish a line of control, and hopefully that doesn't become a frozen conflict zone like in Kashmir, where that line of control becomes a de facto border, but it's not really ever resolved. You want that to be. What you want to end up with is a new border, and that is accepted internationally.
That's going to happen. The new border is going to happen, and I don't know if I can put a percentage even of when this could end or a time frame on it, but I do agree that had the Democrats won, no matter whether it was Biden still on the ticket or Harris still on the ticket, had any of the Democrats, whoever they ponied up, had one of them won, I would say 100% chance this war continues into perpetuity. Another, 20-year Afghanistan boondoggle for us, right? 20 years. But the fact that it was Trump in particular that won, not just any old Republican, it was Trump. I think there actually is a chance that the war comes to an end. And I would say during his presidency. That's the only time frame I can put on it. I think that's one of the legacies I think he is eyeballing, and he wants to be that guy because the war started under Biden, and I think he would like to see it end under his watch because he's a narcissist. He wants to be able to have that claim to fame. And he's going to be, into his 80s when he's out of term. And, at this point, at this age, when you have that kind of power twice, you start looking at legacy and having survived, one literal, like near, it wasn't even a miss. I can't say it was a near miss because it struck his ear. It struck his body, his person. He survived, 2 assassination attempts, one of which actually struck him. I think you start looking into your life and going, okay, are my only legacies these hotels all around the world? Mm-hmm. Is it only my children, my grandkids? Or, me as president, what is my legacy? And I think this is the first time he may have thought about that after the assassination attempts.
I think that's right. So, mortality's got to be weighing heavily upon him.
Yeah, he's pushing 80. So, I think that's the only thing I can say is within the 4 years. I'm not optimistic it ends soon.
Agreed.
Because I think Zelensky and the Europeans are gonna screw it all up for America's chances of withdrawing our participation. So
right. Agreed.
Yeah. All right. That's gonna do it for us. Thank you all so much for staying tuned to the TMI show. I am Manila Chan. That's Ted Rall. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you are on YouTube, as well as the thumbs up. Smash that thing on the on the Rumble channel. Everybody in the Rumble chat, keeping it hot. Thank you guys so much for staying with us. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Coffee Crew. Thank you all. We'll see you mañana. Adios, amigos.
Bye, everyone.